So the learning curve on this is pretty steep. It looks intimidating since you're probably not going to be able to even make a sound out of it without looking at the manual, but it's kind of like learning shortcuts in Excel. Once you get them down, everything is much faster. The M8 does not use its retro style UI for evil for the most part. Despite only having 4 buttons to interact with your device aside from the D-pad, everything is sufficiently accessible and the button combos are easy to learn. Your controls are the following. We have the D-pad, up, down, left, right, basic as it gets. The button that will be your main way to select and interact with things is the edit button, which is this one right here. Then we have our option button, which is mainly used for navigation and button combos and other secondary functions. Then we have play, which is just stopping and starting playback, but also previewing sample or preset patches from your library. Then we have shift, which is our main navigation option, and also for activating secondary functions. So what are we looking at here? This is the song or S view. Here we have a grid showing us 8 columns or monophonic channels, along with 256 rows of available space for our chains. More on that in a second. You'll quickly realize that the 3-digit number in question does not show up. Instead, this UI uses hexadecimal, or hex for short, to improve space, efficiency, and readability. Despite not knowing what 56 or A3 means in hex, you can just use your ears and don't think too much about it. 00, FF is 256, and just kind of guess everything in between. So the way M8 is structured is from macro to micro, meaning that the views will progressively represent the more granular elements of your track as you go further to the right, and the broader song as you move to the left. So using shift plus our D-pad, we can switch views. And as you can see on the small minimap on our bottom right, our next stop is the C or chain view. But first, we gotta create one. To create a chain, we will simply choose a track, so track 1, press the edit button once, and a 00 just populated box. That is our brand new chain. This 00 is the number of our chain. You can hold down the edit button and move to the right or to the left to change the value, and it just means what number chain it is. This will be important later, but for now, just know that you can change the value of anything inside these boxes by holding down the edit button. Now onto the chain. We will press shift and our D-pad to the right to navigate to the next step. So chain view. Here we have a single column with 16 available slots, similarly to our song view. Chains are where our phrases will be placed. As you can see, the P is where we're heading next. So we'll just do as before and press edit on an empty row to create a new phrase. It's that simple. This can be edited as well. And shift to the right, we have our phrase view. Now, phrases are the most fundamental part of working with the M8, as it is finally the place where we can start inputting notes. The purpose of breaking up the structure like this is to allow reusability and recombination. If you have a cool pattern, you can just copy the phrase multiple times in one chain. And if you want a bit of variation, you can clone that chain, tweak the phrases within it, and continue iterating on that pattern in a non-destructive way. So having everything compartmentalized like this makes moving and rearranging those boxes much easier. And also, there is not any undo function. There's nothing to undo something if you mess it up. So having a way to separate the boxes where you have your stuff stored is a good way to kind of help against that. Now, just as before, we will place our cursor where we want to input a note, press edit, and here we go. We have a C4. So let's press play and no sound is coming out. Well, of course, we don't have any instruments selected. So what do we do next? We just do the same as we did before. We navigate to the I, which is our instrument view. Now, instruments are a big broad topic here. Here you'll be prompted to select among the M8's impressive selection of synth engines, from basic waves and subtractive synthesis to a 4-operator FM synth, even a recreation of the mutable instrument braids module that has some very sick physical modeling, and of course our sampler. But for now, we'll just grab a very simple pulse wave. Just grab a 50% pulse wave. Now we just press play. That doesn't sound too exciting, does it? Actually, I'll lower the volume just a tiny bit. But we have a sound. We made it do something. So to add more notes, we just repeat this process. And so if you remember, and if you use context clues, you'll realize that we can just change the note by holding down edit and moving up and down. Pretty easy, huh? So you can change the value of the notes by just holding edit and using your D-pad. Left to right is your fine control, up and right is your coarse control. So you'll be able to jump up octaves by doing up and down, and move notes by doing left and right. So let's just get down a very simple C major chord. Pretty easy, huh? So now that we have some sort of sequence going on, we can just play around a little bit with the instrument to show you some of the capabilities of the built-in engines that this has. So here we just have some of the engine's own kind of idiosyncratic controls. We'll have some of the more, I guess, standard controls like the ADSR available in a separate menu. But here we have size, which is kind of like the fidelity of the sample that we're using. You'll realize how that affects the sound as we get to some other more complex waveforms, such as the saw wave. So you can see with the size at the lowest, it's like a really low fidelity saw wave. But as we get higher, it kind of evens out a little bit. And it's really nice to have this heads-up display that shows up some of the actual properties of the way that we're working with. So, I don't think I need to show you all of the options there, but those are some of the basic things that you can do to shape the sound itself. Now for envelope shaping, we have a separate menu for that. So we go into the mod section, which, as you can see on the little mini map, it's up. So we press shift and up, and here we have our mods. So we have 4 modulators. These are all customizable, so you can choose exactly what each of these are. If you don't actually want an LFO, if you want a trigger envelope, if you want tracking, if you want drum envelope, ADSR, HD, anything you want. You can have 4 LFOs, you can have 1 AHD, 1 ADSR, and 3 other LFOs. It doesn't matter what you want, you can have it, as long as it's only 4 of them. So let's plug in an ADSR to change some of the attack of this. So we choose the mod, we choose the destination, so it's going to go to the volume, and yes, you can have an ADSR go to the filter or the pitch or any of the other options. So we can go to cutoff and also put an ADSR on that. So let's try out max decay, max sus, max release. And since we don't have the filter engaged, oh well, we do have it. So it's the cutoff that we gotta change. So we can just change the direction in which the amount is changing. So we can do positive and we can do negative. We can even add an LFO to change, modulate something like pitch. Okay, I'm not actually a fan of this LFO envelope, but we made it sound all wanky like. So I hope just that little demo shows you how much you can do with just a very simple sound with the mod and with just the basic options that the synth gives you. I also didn't mention, I did play around with this, but this is your little effects section, which is delay and reverb. Very basic, but they're just really nice. I don't ever have to really change the settings. They sound quite good by themselves. So this boring little sound we can just So, great. We have a little C major 7 chord arpeggio. That's fun. That's nice. What do we do next? Well, as I mentioned, the reason why they are so compartmentalized in little boxes and from macro to micro is because now that you have that little pattern, you can just grab that, paste it over. Now, how did you do that? Well, as I mentioned with the edit, you can just place whatever you want. So edit will just copy the last thing that you had selected, right? So since 0, 0 was the last thing that I had selected, every time I click edit, it'll paste 0, 0. If I had 0, 1 or 10 or something like that, 0, 1, next time I click, it'll be 0, 1. How do I delete things? Well, it's just a very simple combination, which is option plus edit. Option plus edit will delete anything you want. Even notes. Boom. And since the last thing that I had touched with edit was the E, it'll just paste it back in. So it's really simple to work with. So now we can just have 4 phrases on this chain go to this little arpeggio. With that, we might want some variation. So we just go ahead and click on the next phrase, go from 0, 0 to 0, 1, and start over again. Now, that's something that we can do. We can just start here and make a separate phrase. However, we can also do something interesting, which is called cloning, which requires you to press Shift plus Option, which will select this little phrase that we have here. And then while holding Shift, we can press Edit, and it'll clone the phrase to the next one over. So if it was phrase 0, it'll clone it to phrase 1. If it was phrase 7, it'll clone it to phrase 8. Anything that's the next available slot, it'll clone it to. So now what this does is that we have this phrase and this phrase, which are currently identical. However, I need to make this very clear. Phrases and chains will always contain what they say on the tin. What that means is that anything that is 0, 0 will be the same. So if I change just one note here on the pattern, on this 0, 0 right here, it'll copy over to every single phrase that is 0, 0. The same happens with chains. So the reason why you will make a clone of something is to non-destructively change that or make a new variation on that. So here I made a new phrase that's a clone of phrase 0, 0. But now if I change this, if I go all of these stay the same. But I actually don't really like how that sounds. So even if I just pasted all 4 of these here, I don't have to go in one by one to change them. I can just come here and change them. And all of them are gonna be the same. Now, let's get out of this chain for a second. This is all wrapped up in just this little 0, 0 square. Everything we just did, the instrument, the notes that we inputted, the phrases, this arrangement of phrases. So you can see how much room we have to work with, how much space you have to develop a musical idea. Because once you look at this in terms of every single one of these little boxes contains so much space for ideas, it becomes apparent that you can do quite a lot of this. as a reminder, all of the channels are monophonic. So if you want to do a chord, like an actual 3-note chord, polyphony is only achieved by putting the notes on different tracks. However, you don't need to do that. That's the reason we use trackers, because we want to try something different, a different approach to making music. So using something like this, we can go around, make a new chain here. So just as a reminder, if I just plugged in 0, 0 here, it'll be the exact same chain, as you can see. So we make, maybe this is chain 10, just to make them differentiable, of course. So phrase, I want phrase 2, because we are already using phrase 1 and 0. So let's go with phrase 2. Now, using the option button, I can go between the phrases using left and right, and also up and down. So this is phrase 0, and I can go down to phrase 1 by holding option and doing some navigation tricks here. You can see the little arrow here on the left moving as I move between those phrases. So that's also a useful thing. Useful to compare it also between tracks. So this is track 1, this is track 2 that I'm moving between. Now, let's say I want something to go in between these spaces. So instead of starting on 0 and then doing every quarter note, I'll just I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I can just reference the other to make sure I'm not stepping on the notes that I want to get in between of, which is a lot more helpful. So now I can go back to song and play, or I can go here, which is only gonna play this specific phrase, but I can press shift plus play to play everything at once. Which is really cool, because I can either focus on just this or play the whole thing to make sure it sounds good in context. Great. So now we can just copy this phrase, and also just as a quick thing, if you don't copy the phrase, if you leave this as like a one phrase chain, it'll just loop. So this is advancing through its own phrases. This is not gonna stop. This is just gonna loop whatever it has inside, even if it doesn't match the number of chains or phrases in the other chains. Sorry. So now if we want to move on to making a clone of this, we can just do that as I showed you before, which is shift and option to select it. I'm blanking on the names of the buttons because I don't call them that. I just call them like A and B, or whatever arrow keys I'm using. But option, and then shift and edit to clone it. Okay, so now we have a clone. We can edit this. So now we have these two chains containing two different sets of phrases, 0, 1, 2, and 3, that are repeating, and that's all great. However, now we have two different chains containing two different sets of phrases. What do you want to make a phrase that contains a chain that mixes up those phrases? How do I non-destructively make a chain that contains both these from phrase 0 and phrase 3, for example? Well, I just create a new chain 1, and just plug in the phrases. They are always gonna be the same. No matter where they are always going to be the same phrases. But because they're in a different chain, the chain arranges them differently, but the content of the phrases is going to remain the same. So now and I didn't have to destroy either of these in order to extract the phrases off of them. So that's why everything lives in a separate little box. 0, 0 is gonna be 0, 0 always, and if I change something from 0, 0, it's gonna reflect on every single 0, 0. But the chains are the same way, and you can arrange things differently if you have a different chain. So that's why we use cloning to non-destructively do that, and that's why you can just copy this and just copy it, for however long you like. Maybe 4 times is a little too long. That's great. That's great. Now, maybe we want to do something with samples. Maybe we want to do a little bit of sampling. So let's add a new chain. So now, new chain. However, whenever I press edit, it's always going to give me the last thing that I selected. So I don't really want that. I want the next thing. I want the next big thing. I want the next available phrase that I have to play with. So what I do is I grab an empty space and I press edit, but I press it twice. So it'll automatically transport me to the next available phrase, the next empty phrase that I have not yet used. So I go inside this, and I don't want to really hear this anymore. This is instrument 0. I want the next big thing. So I double press instrument 0, 1. Let's get it. So I select my instrument. It's gonna be sampler. So I'm gonna go ahead and load a sample. This is all the internal structure of the SD card that you're gonna use on your M8. You navigate it just the same as you do with the rest of the menus. You use edit to select, and you can go back by just pressing option to get out of the menu, or you can just press shift and left to go back in the folder structure. So let's go into samples. Let's hear some of these pads. And how do we preview samples? We can just press play. kind of like this one. So this, I don't know exactly what key it is in, but I can just go ahead and put it on a C4, just baseline C4, and see in context what it sounds like, and I can just adjust it from there. So it clearly is not actually C. So maybe I can just copy this, I'll make a new one, and as a reminder, I need to really remind you of this. Whenever you click edit, it's gonna just copy everything from the last time that you selected something. So in this situation, I don't have to change the instrument, I don't have to change the note, it's all the same. So that helps a lot when inputting notes. Yeah, I like that. I think that sounds good. Also, you'll realize, like, listen to this. The note re-triggers. So if you don't actually want that, if you have a big sample that doesn't have what's it called, a note that needs to re-trigger in order for it to sound good, or you have a long sample that you want to play out, you can just delete these and just let the sample play out. However, you don't want to leave the space open. What you want to do is introduce what we're going to call an separator or an empty space. So you're going to click edit, and then you're going to hold it and go up to FE or FF, whatever is the highest phrase number, because that's gonna leave basically the possible phrase that you could ever use is gonna leave it empty. And you're never gonna have to worry about this, because you're never gonna use FE, you're never gonna use FD. You know, these are the 255th of your phrases. You're never gonna use them. So this is gonna be your separator, your empty space. And also you can do that with chains. Just go up to FE, just fill this out with FE like that. So you see how the sample keeps playing? Here it stopped. So we can do a re-trigger right here to make it play for as long as possible. So we're basically filling out all the in-betweens to make sure it plays for as long as possible. So that's easy enough. Now we have a pad, we have a little melody. We are doing great. However, what happens if my computer turns off? Well, I have to navigate to a little menu called the project, which is up. As you can see on the minimap, up for project. Now here is where we can change a lot of things about the project. We can change the tempo, transpose it, change the scale. That matters a little bit, but not really. We can change the name and save this project. So what do we name it? Well, we can hold edit and it'll give us a little keyboard to type our project into, or we can click random and let the computer do it for us. Jaunty shoes, I'm not really a fan of that one. Rosy light, I like that one. So there we go, and we have saved this song. Easy enough. Now Now that we have that saved, I want to change the tempo. I wanted to make it a little bit faster. Let's try 160. 160. I think we're gonna make this into a little bit of a jungle track. So let's try 160. Though maybe I want these in particular, these the synth to be something else. So we can try to load in something. I'm thinking more of a wind chime kind of thing. I like the sound of these. I really like these. And now that I have the wind chime, they sound kind of a little bit too high. I can change with detune. And just as a reminder, instrument is all of the instances of that instrument. So me changing this changes all of the things that had that instrument previously. However, I think the timbre doesn't really work that well for what I'm trying to do here, actually. Maybe we can find something else, something... Let's just try simple piano Z. Let's... I honestly think it's the pad that's not in tune with what we're doing. Maybe it's the other way around. Let's try this. You know, maybe I'm better off using something that I know the key of, and and using an actual pad that's like C, just a regular C. You know, maybe. Sorry, I'm like focusing way too much on something like this. But this is just the sound making process. That's just what it is. And I think maybe it's fun to look at how I move around in the menus. Just I'm really having a hard time figuring this out. I think it's just because it's a freaking minor chord or something. So now I found something interesting that I do kind of like. But now I don't like how the little tinny piano sounds beneath it. So let's just switch that up as well. Maybe we'll do something with the macros in. I can show you some cool stuff with the macros in. So instead of the saw, that sounds really... let's just lower the volume a little bit. This dry is basically the dry signal of the synth, so you can lower that to lower the volume. You can change the volume of a whole track. I'll show you that in a sec. But this is the main way that you can get it to not sound as harsh while you're editing. Okay, now we have a little thing that I kind of like. So, let's get onto drums, to some percussion. Let's go into chain 30. Double tap to make sure that we have a clear phrase. And just click, and it's gonna load the last instrument that we had. We're gonna go to instrument number 2 and load up a sample. What sample should we load up? We can go into some of the BMT breaks that we have. So play 2. Check them out. I think this one's really cool. I haven't used this one before. So we have, the sample. We can even edit it. We can chop it manually from here, which is really cool. But we're going to do something a little bit easier. We're going to slice it. How do we slice? We click slice and we select how many slices we want. 16. Sounds good. So now our C1 is going to be our first slice. C sharp, D, and so on. So we can just fill this up. Generally, we can just go linearly. However, you see a little problem here is that the sample is a little bit longer than we're giving it space for. So instead of doing all that just crumpled together, we just leave a little space on there. Sounds good. We can copy that, and let's do a little trick. We can clone that to phrase 7, and since we have this little bit of space left over, and we can clone this. Make the 8. phrase 9. And we can even clear this up just to make sure that we're not messing with anything, you know, that weird. And we could do this. I think we can leave it at that for this session. But what I want to make sure that you understand is that no matter how strange this kind of interface looks, how many things are just numbers instead of being, more clearly labeled, how many button combinations you may think that you need to know, we have really only used kind of like 4 button combinations, which is just shift plus the D-pad to move along here. We have used the edit plus option to delete something. We have used shift plus B to select, and shift plus option to select, and shift plus edit to clone. And that's about it for the main button combinations that we've been using, and everything is just navigating menus and using edit to just change parameters. It's really, really simple to get into the groove of making music with this thing, and I think it's such a wonderful experience to just have this grid be your only way of interacting with the machine, making sure that you're like very, very fast tracked into making music instead of thinking about the MIDI, instead of thinking about the parameters. Just put the notes in, and since it takes like a lot of your brain power to just put the notes in, you're less focused on the little things that don't really matter when it comes to like a composition, and it allows you to keep iterating. As you can see, I kept cloning, I kept changing, I kept iterating. It's super fast, super quick, and super easy to do. Very fun. So cool. It's just an amazing tool that I hope that you can learn to love as much as I do.